first marathon in February 2007. At this point, I had not been able to consistently keep an exercise regimen for more than a year, and running just 2 miles on the treadmill took a lot of self-discipline. How I landed on this goal for myself is another story for another day. However, it wasn't just enough for me to try to finish a marathon. I wanted to also do it in 4 hours. Not a good idea for a first time. Fast forward to October 7th, 2007. It's race day. It's very hot and humid, 80 degrees with 100% humidity. I was nervous because I knew that my body had not done very well with this kind of heat in the past. But I trained for this all year long, and I was going to do this. And it went pretty well in the first half of the race. I actually was passing people and thought, oh, this is going pretty great. I'm going to meet my goal. And I was on schedule for my goal until mile 13, when everything changed. Started going downhill from there. I noticed that I was cramping in my legs a little bit, was starting to fatigue. I'm looking at my dad who's running next to me, and he seems to be doing fine. The only thing in my mind that he's doing different is he's using goo. For those of you who don't know what goo is, it's basically a sugary, pasty, sticky substance that you're supposed to consume when you're doing endurance distances or races, and it helps to fuel your energy across time. You're not supposed to run without it and then all of a sudden decide to do it on race day, which I knew, but against my better knowledge, out of desperation, I decided at mile 17, which was our goo stop, I was going to stock up on some goo. So I got to mile 17, grabbed about 8 packets of goo, stuck 7 of them in the little waistband that was around my body, and ate one of them as I was finishing, or as I was walking through mile 17. Big mistake. When I finally got to the bathroom about a mile later, I actually tried to vomit because I was just desperately trying to get what felt like a brick in my stomach out. It wasn't successful, but about 200 meters later, I got to the next Gatorade stop, and that took care of it. I had barely gulped down my first Gatorade, or the only Gatorade that I was drinking at that point, and when my stomach decided to spontaneously eject this from my body. Fortunately, I was able to get out of the crowd before this happened, or as it was about to happen. And this became the pattern for the next 7 miles as I vomited every half a mile. It was not a pleasant experience, but I was able to finish, very demoralized and defeated. I felt like I had failed because even though I finished, I wanted to do it in 4 hours, and I did it in 5.5. And I know that sounds really ridiculous to anyone who hasn't run a marathon, but for me, it was such a big failure that I just pushed it to the back of my memory so I wouldn't have to relive the trauma of the entire experience. A few years later, several years later actually, I actually started running into some health issues as a result of different patterns that happened throughout my entire life, and it forced me to really reconsider where I was at and how I was approaching life. This involved also reviewing past failures, including my marathon experience, and I'd like to share 3 lessons that I got from this with all of you. The first lesson, and there are many more, are set your goals wisely. I think goals are a good thing. They help us to move forward, they help us to grow in life. But if we set goals that are unrealistic within the time frame or perhaps too specific, we set ourselves up for failure. In my case, if I had decided that all I wanted to do was finish a marathon, that was my goal, I would have been elated to cross that finish line. Instead, I felt like a failure. And the reality is, if I had set a more broad goal to just finish a marathon, at least to start with, I probably would have had a better experience. Which brings me to lesson number 2. Remember to enjoy the journey. For me, as a type A person, and I'm sure other type A personalities can agree to this is kind of hard. It becomes very easy to focus so heavily on the goal that you forget about the journey, and sometimes you even begin to hate the journey completely. If I had set the goal to just finish the marathon, and showed up on race day knowing full well that my body did not respond well to this kind of heat. It was not unusual for me to start throwing up running in high heat like this. I probably would have adjusted what I was doing and had a much more pleasurable race experience, maybe even finished in a faster time because I wouldn't have been sitting on the sidewalk half the time waiting to recover. The third lesson that I'd like to share with all of you is to not go at it alone. Bring others along for the journey. I had been fortunate enough. I was going to try to prepare for the race and run it on my own, but my dad, who's a veteran runner, volunteered to help train for the race and also to help run next to me in the race, I had enough sense to actually do this. And not just having a partner during the training experience, but also having someone to run the race with me was very valuable. While I was having a miserable experience, my dad was right there next to me, bringing me Gatorade and water, giving me ice that I could put in the back of my neck so I could cool down. He was constantly checking to see if I actually did want to finish it, and right there with me, as I said, yes, I trained all year, I'm going to do this. And if it wasn't for my dad, I really don't think I would have made it through that race. He also allowed me to literally hang on to him like this for the last mile, because I didn't think I was going to get to the finish line. I was right there, it was a mile away, but I was done. I just didn't have anything left in me. Thanks to him, I was able to finish it. Now, had I taken time back in 2007 to reflect on all of this and extract some lessons that I could apply to the rest of my life, I probably could have saved myself from the health crisis that landed me in the hospital and sucked almost all my confidence from my life. The lessons can be applied specifically to running, but I also think they can be applied to other life goals. And to recap the lessons, it's 1, choose your goals very wisely, 2, enjoy the journey, and 3, bring others along for the journey. I think if I had done those things, my life would have been very different in the last 10 years, but I'm learning to apply those lessons today, and I hope and invite everyone who's had life goals that they feel like they failed at and still haven't rebound from, or are hesitant to set any goals because they're afraid that they're going to run into an experience like this, to use the lessons from my failure and reevaluate goals in your own life, and hopefully have a better experience than I did in achieving those goals. Thank you very much.